Welcome to an all-new edition of Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative editor-in-chief. To my left, you're right at home. It's in his contract. He has to do his own intro.
Hi, I'm Tom. I'm here do Nerd Initiative. Okay, but I'm an 11 hours straight from the ODPH studios. My name's off the cuff Tom, Nerd Initiative's pop culture connoisseur. Ken, Kurt, always a pleasure.
Indeed, and we have a fantastic book to talk to you about because it poses the question, what would happen if George Lucas and Tarantino had a baby? And what would that baby become? And the answer is very simple, a massive sci-fi hyper-violent romantasy. Yes, this is a book that you definitely want to keep your eyes on for. The FOC is October 6th and is dropping in the shops on November 26th. And this is a book that definitely has our attention, but obviously with the writer behind it, you know this is one is going to catch your attention no matter what, because he's the writer behind such books as Indigo Children, It's Only Teenage Wasteland, Youth, Stillman, and the hit series at Image Comics, Lost Fantasy. But that is then. Right now, we're talking Galactic by DSTLRY. So please give a warm welcome to the one and only CURT PIRES. CURT, what is going on?
Thanks for having me, guys. Super excited to be here and talk about the great stuff we're cooking with DSTLRY and all the other publishers.
Yeah, I mean, let's start off with DSTLRY first, because obviously they're a brand that is known for really pushing the boundaries of creativity, and Galactic is really right up that alley. So why don't we break down about how this whole project came to be?
Yeah, so I've been working the last couple of years actually on like a number of DSTLRY projects, but Galactic is just sort of the first one to to sort of come out. We sort of like last year in New York, we teased a project with John Romita Jr., which we're still working on, but Galactic, we're really excited to finally be bringing to people in the sort of oversized prestige DSTLRY format. Really, from the ground up, the book was built to be sort of an IMAX comic, right? Because I think the thing is with these DSTLRY books is the ones that are really, really great are the ones that are take advantage of it, right? Stuff like the Blood Brothers Mother or
Mhm.
Spectrograph, I think are my two favorites. And those books really, you can tell the creatives have thought about, the oversized pages and lots of splashes and stuff. So when we're cooking Galactic, first off, it was important to find the right artist, which I think we absolutely did it in Emil Carpina, who's he's done a lot of stuff, had a prolific career, but I don't feel like anyone's really unleashed him like to his full uh potential and sort of until this book, right? And I just sort of built the book around Emil Carr and the format and really tapping into what I love about stories like Star Wars, and sort of also, Indiana Jones kind of an influence on the lead character, and then sort of more comic influences, stuff like Saga or Sex Criminals. So it's sort of a real mashup of all these different things I love, but our one sentence pitch for it is true romance meets Star Wars. So it's about a bounty hunter sent to bring home a runaway princess who's ran away from home. She's on a hippie planet doing drugs, having sex, experimenting, and he sort of kidnaps her to bring her home, and they stumble into the midst of this big conspiracy and interstellar war and end up maybe falling in love along the way. So it's a pretty unique book that taps into a lot of my favorite genres and storytelling modes.
I definitely have to agree with that. And you already gave us the quick elevator pitch, but I love the whole idea that you're saying that that there's this and there's that. There's a lot of different layers. I really think another thing we can always that you could say in regards to this book is but wait, there's more.
Mhm.
Like it really has that. Oh well, wait, we've got this and we've got this and we've got that. What do you think about this particular book is really the big pitch point, the big selling point that needs to get out there that everybody needs to know? Because a lot of people aren't, really familiar with DSTLRY. What do you think about this book's going to bring them around to it?
I mean, I think it's similar to what I did with Lost Fantasy, where with Lost Fantasy, we're making fantasy accessible for people, right? Because myself, I love a good fantasy story like the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movie, or even, the Game of Thrones show until the last couple seasons. But a lot of fantasy I can find very hard to get into. So with Lost Fantasy, I would almost challenge myself to create a fantasy that I would want to pick up if I was reading the book, right? That's always the at the format foremost of my head is that you have to be making books that you'd be excited to buy, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're not, what are you doing? Uh, and so with Galactic, I was sort of applying that same challenge myself to sci-fi, which can be just as impenetrable and stale, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, I love a good science fiction story, but there's so much of it that's just, like Star Trek, where there's the aliens with the weird fucking foreheads and shit, and you're trying to figure out like how do I get into it? What are these guys and what happened to their foreheads to make them so squished up? Uh, but I wanted to make something accessible and grounded and violent with a real tension to the plot and human characters and sort of emotional stakes. And so again, it was just sort of trying to tell a grounded story in this big, larger than life science fiction space that I myself would be excited to read and run to the comic shop to pick up.
And just to touch on that, Worf once said, "We don't talk about it with outsiders."
Yeah.
But going to this book and your other book that's out right now, Lost Fantasy, you've been gravitating to a lot more towards the fantasy genre with your writing. What has been the biggest pull there for you as a writer?
Towards fantasy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with more I always love genre material. I think that the fantasy stuff, I love the world building and escapism of fantasy, right? Like I said before, I think it's just finding a way to tell a human story and sort of uh ground that. And it's funny because we're in the process of spinning off Lost Fantasy, and I'm doing this new book that's going to be co-written by Franklin Jonas, who's the fourth Jonas brother and a really talented creative in his own right.
Yep.
But that's also it's connected to Lost Fantasy, but it's very different from Lost Fantasy. So that's another example of I found another way, I think, to refresh the fantasy genre, and that one would be really interesting because it's a very different book from Lost Fantasy, but still takes a sort of very grounded uh approach to the storytelling that involves some very fantastical things. So I think it's just like a challenge, and I always loved when creatives find a way to make accessible storytelling and sort of ground genres and tropes we love, right? Like one of my favorite comics that got me into comics was Mark Millar and Brian Hitch's Ultimates, right? And the whole conceit of that book and why it was so successful is it took the inaccessibility of the Avengers at the time and took it back to totally square one and made it so like everyone could read it, and it was, just sort of can't miss comics. And that's sort of, I think, a big influence on my approach. And so I love taking these tried and true genre trappings and trying just to refresh them and make them accessible to people again.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that's just something we're seeing, especially in this book too. Like it is really an eye opener on many levels, but it's also like a great new reader's introduction into fantasy. Like that's the first thing I think I took away from it when I was done reading it is just how accessible it is, and especially with the fantasy genre, like you touched upon, it can be a little difficult to walk into first, but this is something that I really think fans are going to gravitate towards as a nice intro into a whole new world with endless possibilities.
Yeah, I think that the thing too about Galactic is that we're while we're our way into it's really grounded, we're still have this huge world and canvas that we play with. So as the book goes on, readers will get slowly drip fed sort of the the cool stuff they want out of science fiction fantasy storytelling. So the world will get bigger and will expand, but doing it in a way that doesn't give them whiplash and is still sort of character centric and really focused on our core cast of characters, I think is just a smart way that we want to approach it.
And that's a big thing on that, like we were talking about the accessibility, you know, coming from a big sci-fi background myself, oh, well, the Klingons do this, or the Androsians do this, and so on and so forth. You put in right here in this first issue, you didn't say, oh, well, this alien does this, and
Mm.
this alien does that. And that is a good thing because we're so focused on the characters. Now, out of the characters that you've, dropped right here in the first issue, who's been your favorite to write and why?
Uh, Probably my favorite character is the wolf character because it's based on my dog, and so I get such a
Right.
kick out of writing that character.
Did
But I really,
did you James Gunn that and like have his face, overlaid and everything?
oh, I mean, it's actually funny because when I saw the Superman movie, it kind of reminded me what I'm doing with this book, right? Because you could tell that crypto really came from him loving his dog, right? And his dog being sort of bad, right? Ozu, I think is his dog's name. Uh and so with me, yeah, I did send Amilcar a bunch of photos of my dog, and uh it's really funny because Amilcar does a great job of it, but James Stocco also on his variant cover like nailed my dog. Like I sent James just one picture of him, and he like the expression he put on the dog on the cover is like it looks exactly like my dog. So it's a real kick. But I love the friendship between those two Jack and Wolf, because it's sort of obviously plays with the Han Solo Chewbacca thing a bit, but I did base it a bit off of my relationship with my dog, where my dog got me through a hard time, right? So that character who he has a really kind of a tough backstory, and the dog and him sort of look out for each other, and so that sort of mirrors my life journey with getting the dog. And then I do really like the character of Soraya as well. I think uh she's beautiful and scrappy and smart and intelligent in ways that is different from the Jack character. So I really kind of love all the characters in this one, which I can't always say about everything I do, but I do think our cast in Galactic is special.
That's a good dad answer.
Well, yeah, but it's true though as you read it, and you can kind of sense this too, that one, you're having a lot of fun with this series,
Hmm.
and two, like how you're connecting with the characters, and really where you're putting them is in a lot of extreme situations. Like, as we alluded to, the Tarantino aspect of this, I think really shines in the first issue. Was there ever a point where you had to pull an idea back from the first issue? Like you thought maybe, okay, for the introduction, this might be too much, like let's save it for later.
No, because my approach is actually almost the opposite, where like I try to do stuff, and so sometimes I am worried, okay, is this too much when I'm writing it? But I feel like specifically in Galactic, the scene at the end where they're sort of at at the slaver ring or whatever, right? That's kind of, I was like, is this gonna get flagged by Distillery when I send this in? Uh, and like everyone was cool with it because I think, again, was walking a tightrope with that scene where I can't really spoil it too much, but there's an element of it that's funny, right? Because the outfits the characters are wearing, like it's a bit of a troll on obviously the slave Leia thing, but I think with that scene, I wanted to really show how scrappy the Soraya character is just on her own, right? And obviously that scene uh it's a homage to Star Wars as well as it kind of homages the Pulp Fiction scene where Ving Rhames' character gets captured, right? So that was a scene that literally sort of does combine the two big influences on this thing. And I just think there's so many comics that read exactly the same and are so safe and sanitary, and a lot of the times uh you could these writers and creatives would be interchangeable, that I feel like to stand out as a creative and really leave a mark, you got to do crazy stuff, right? You can't be afraid to have a voice and take some risks, because at the end of the day, that's what we need in storytelling, right? We want comics to be the most exciting medium and to do the stuff that other people are afraid to. So I think with this one, I tried to to push it so it wouldn't just feel like a Star Wars clone.
Yeah, that's an easy thing to like when you read it. Like I said, when you get done reading it, you know it's not a Star Wars clone. Like there's homages and like we have alluded to, but it's one thing to really push the envelope with this, and that is something like I say is a big take home. And I like how you put upon that too about really being the creative and not to be interchangeable. Like I say, it's always better to be infamous than forgotten. And in this situation, you want to leave the reader with a first impression, and especially with like the other books that Distillery does, they're known to push that creative boundary and to really let the creators run a bit wild, I would say, within reason, and especially have those impressions that when you put down that book, you want to get the whoa, like that reaction out of the reader.
Yeah.
And I could say easily you have that with Galactic in all the best senses.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's one of the things I like about working at distilleries that they're really give you a lot of freedom creatively, right? And support you as a creator. And I think, obviously I have that with Image as well, but I think uh it's great to have that at Distillery and sort of have them really get behind it and push books where we're taking these risks.
It's interesting, you say that they go into the extreme situations, and there's it definitely does stand out. I'll just be very honest and let everybody know, because when you do, get this on that FOC date, when you open up that first page, boom, it's right there in your face in more ways than one. And coming into a whole new genre like this, well, not whole new genre, but coming into the whole sci-fi, fantasy, romantasy, is that even a word, by
It
the
is
way?
now.
It is now.
After reading this book, it is absolutely a
It is
word.
now.
Romantasy is unfortunately a word, was it's this huge thing, right? Where you go to the bookstore and the all the books are these romance fantasy books. It's it's the big thing now for what a lot of women are reading, right? Yeah, so Sean is the one who put that on there, and I don't know how I feel about that, but if it helps us sell a few more books, I guess I'll let him do it.
Well, speaking of which, like I said, you're definitely pushing the envelope. With everything that you were trying to put into the book, how was it? How was the feedback going back, but between yourself and the art team, as far as, hey, this is what I was writing, and this is what I saw. Where can we come to a happy medium, or was it just kismet? Did it work out? That first time you sent over the script.
It was really kismet because I think Amilcar was uh he really loved the script when he read it and was sort of having a blast with it, and I think he appreciated how the risks I wanted to take and was right there with me because again, you just draw so many comic books and there's just a lot of the similar ground is covered, and with this I really wanted to uh try my hand at telling a fresh version of this, interstellar sort of space opera based story. And I think we do a lot of things, like you said, right from page one, which that preview is out. So it starts with an alien's head exploding and the caption, "This is a love story," right? And I think that's sort of like a statement of intent, right?
Mhm.
And I love when books do that. And I think you really always got to try and have a great first and last page in every issue. And that's what we tried to do with this one. And that first page really it just feels like Galactic to me. And so I think I really love the whole opening sequence.
Oh, it definitely makes a statement out the gate. And I
Yeah.
think Emilcar's art, I immediately thought Mobius. Like when I read it, like it had that Fifth Element vibe to it. Like it really had that certain sci-fi feel to it.
A classic feel
Yeah.
to it. It's not it as much as it's modern sci-fi. A lot of the design had a very almost Buck Rogers a little bit, some of the shapes and the designs. That's at least what I got out of it.
Well, I think the easiest thing is you can definitely tell where it's picked, where the homages are.
Yes.
And you can definitely see that here. And that's one thing that makes it, as much a writing experience as a visual sequence. And to go on that first page, like you really hit the pace running. Was there anything that you would say like you were trying to like balance out more with the themes that were going on? Because like I say, there's, without giving too much away, we've got a lot of action, we got a lot of drama, we've got a lot of, in dealing with, Soraya's background, it's more complicated than we think to realize. Was that kind of tough balancing it out?
Yeah, it was tough balancing that out, and I sort of was the tightrope we walked for the first issue, right? Because we had a lot of ground to cover, but I think we managed to do it, and I think we did it in a fun way where we sort of jump around a bunch in time with the narrative. And then yeah, to speak to your early comment where you were referencing Mobius, that's definitely a big influence on the book. Like I said, to Hamilcar, like because he definitely has some Mobius in his work, but when we started working on this, we sort of both talked about really pushing that influence to the front,
Mm.
uh, and doing a really Euro like clean line style with lots of detail, and then also the way that Lee colors it is very inspired by the way that the Mobius comics were colored, where there's uh sort of like it's really interesting. Some of the colors are flat at points, but there's a lot of depth to how he's coloring it, and sort of lots of different uh planes and focal points. So the European comics were specifically Mobius stuff a real influence on this.
Yeah, you can definitely tell. Like, and for fans that are not used to that style, they're in for an extra treat with this. Like I say, the story is engaging enough, but when you start seeing that artwork and it pops, like that is something that really makes this a truly unique experience for fans to check out. And we can't stress enough about making sure you have this ordered up.
Now, because you said, there's a lot of things that are referenced or inspired by, say, Star Wars and whatnot. How much of that did you try to homage? How much of it did you say, hey, I'm only going to take it up to this point because I want to go this way with it?
I mean, I don't think honestly, outside of the vibe and some of the character, it's kind of like honestly what we're trying to do here is the way Rick and Morty uses Back to the Future as a springboard is basically what we're doing with Star Wars. So like as it goes on, I want it to feel less and less inspired by Star Wars. And there's loose elements of the story that are homages to Star Wars, but that we don't want people just to be thinking about Star Wars when they're reading it, right? We want them
Right.
to sort of lose themselves in the story. And so there's a handful of sci-fi uh influences on the book outside of Star Wars, but it's like part of it too is that I love Star Wars and uh I just don't think there's really been that outside of like Andor, there hasn't been really that much great Star Wars lately, especially movie wise. I mean, I just watched the trailer for the new one they put out, and it looked so boring to me. It looked like it could have just been a direct Disney Plus thing, and I'm just like, this is what you're gonna think's gonna get people to the theater. So I'm sort of trying to make the type of science fiction story that would get me excited again about Star Wars, and I think something like this is exactly uh what that sort of storytelling needs. But to be fair, I'm hopeful about the Sean Levy Star Wars project. I think that looks cool, and I think they're making some interesting choices there.
Yeah, I think the Mandalorian Grogu one, I think, is very, very down the middle of how people feel about it. But I can understand that. But it goes back to what you were touching upon too about not playing it safe and especially making that first impression and not being afraid to go and push the boundaries and really make something stand out that isn't cookie cutter. That is
Right.
something that really is original. And that is something we get with this story thus far. We know, obviously, this issue is planned out. There's another one coming behind it. How far should we expect to see this go? Or is there like a long-term ongoing, putting the karma out in the world for this to keep going and hearing the story about Jet and Wolf?
So the first issue is, or sorry, the first series is 3 issues,
Okay.
with the third one being a little bit bigger. And then we'll go from there. It's the story and ending is done in such a way that we could do more if we want, but it's just really a matter of if really building the audience up for the book and seeing if the demand's there. But I sort of see the first three issues are like the first movie of the series, right? So there's beginning, middle, and end to it. And then if we want to come back and do more, we can definitely do that.
Now, because you're mentioning that this is, very much like a trilogy, we definitely see there's some influences, say like Tarantino. What has been some of his particular favorite, your favorite films of his that you've, really worked into your writing style?
Well, I think I think the way he jumps around in time, and non-linear storytelling is probably the biggest thing, right? That's in all his movies, and that's something we use, a lot in the first chapter of Galactic, where you sort of like jump around a bunch, and so that's always been influence of mine, and then I think also just speaking to we are talking about being pushing the envelope and sort of being fearless with your storytelling choices, and that's one thing I've always really respected about Quentin Tarantino is that he doesn't really let people dictate what he does in his stories, right? I love the some of the crazier stuff in his movies, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when he
Mm.
throwers the girl in the swimming pool and there's just all sorts of crazy shit in his stuff. And so like that's a creative I sort of admire and respect and try to tap into that fearlessness when I'm making my stuff.
But you need to have that though. Like I
Yeah.
said, that's something that, we can't stress enough is just, getting outside the comfort zone and really doing that. And it's like Tarantino does that with his movies. You're doing this with your stories going on. And this is one, like I say, with Galactic, it is pushing the boundaries, but it is pushing them in the right direction. And I really think when fans get this book in their hands, they're going to have a lot to rave about. Much like another book that you have out right now, Lost Fantasy at Image Comics. Now, if anybody is not familiar with that, what is the elevator pitch for that series?
So I'd sort of say it's like Dungeons and Dragons meets CSI, which is a way sort of a friend of mine pitched it to me where so it's about there's a sort of magical world that exists underneath our own sort of like Harry Potter, and when something from the magic world breaks through to our into our world, there's sort of a organization that works with the FBI to stop it, and they're called the Great Hunters, and they made contact with our world uh, about 150 years ago, and so they solve cases involving basically monsters or magical things where they happen in our world, and they suppress it, sort of like Men in Black, but for fantasy creatures, right?
Hmm.
And so our first story arc of Lost Fantasy follows a rookie monster hunter, Henry Blackheart, and he's sent to a Montana town following basically a massacre at a party, and he has to solve this murder case that is magical in nature. And so we sort of see this small town mystery play out with a bunch of elevated fancy elements as well. And so we just wrapped our first story arc of that. All four issues are out right now. If you go to your comic shop, you can catch up on them. And then in November, on November 19th, we're putting out our first trade paperback and issue 5 on the same day. And so
Nice.
Ooh.
people can sort of pick up both, which is something I love doing, as a reader. I remember going back to about 10 years ago when sort of Image was having this renaissance, and I loved, when there's uh, a new trade paperback of, whatever book, Saga or, you know, uh, what's that one? Uh, Deadly Class and the new
Yes.
issues on the same day, and so you go and like you can buy the trade and then just keep reading and sort of like catch up. So we wanted to do that, and so both those are out November 19th, and the the Lost Fantasy spinoff, which I was talking a bit about earlier, will be previewed in the back of 5. So that's going to be uh, a, sort of first appearance of that character. So doing a lot of things to try and make uh, the books and the single issues special, so people will go and support their comic shops.
I think I love that idea too, and I'm right there with you about Deadly Class. I'm still not over the fact they canceled that show.
I love the fact that on Lost Fantasy, I believe one, it has that great video game cover, that kind of
The
famous
Final
one.
Fantasy game.
Yeah, I'm thinking if we do, if you guys, when you guys knock out the spinoff, are we going for the next game in the series? Like let's do a Squall homage.
Well, so I'm gonna actually think I'm gonna do the Squall one for the start of the third arc, right? Because the second arc has the Final Fantasy X cover, right? So we're doing that one for the second arc because that's the second most popular one. Uh, but I love Final Fantasy VIII, and that's one of my favorites. So I'm gonna do it for the first issue of the third arc. Basically, the first issue of each arc has a Final Fantasy cover to sort of keep that homage rolling. And then the other issues of the arc all have video game homages, but every first issue of every new arc is a Final Fantasy based cover.
I'm in.
Oh yeah, the series is phenomenal. Like I say, if you haven't checked out Lost Fantasy, now is the perfect time to do it. Is the FOC for the trade paperback up and running still?
Yeah, the trade paperback FOC, I believe is it it's oh geez, I should have looked this up. Hold on, let's go on Lunar right now.
Because the emphasis is when they're down at the comic shops making the order for Galactic by Distillery, you should just go and get double. Make sure you get that trade paperback in, so then you won't miss anything going on in November.
Yeah,
Because
so that sorry to interrupt you. The FOC is 10/13, so it's a week after uh Galactic, right?
Mhm.
And then issue five's FOC is 10/27. So what you do is if you're going to the shop to pre-order Galactic, you just say, "Hey, can I get Galactic and Lost Fantasy trade paperback and the fifth issue all in one go?" So you're making sure you lock them down, but really I'm excited to have two big weeks there where uh we got Lost Fantasy and the trade paperback out, and then the next week we got Galactic. So like it's a couple big weeks where people will just have great new books out for people to enjoy.
Absolutely, because we can't emphasize enough. Get to the comic shops and make sure you pre-order. The
Yes.
FOC is so vital to the comics industry. And like really it's making sure your books that you love are still going to be there and are really going to be something for fans not to miss out on. And especially with what Kurt has going on here. Lost Fantasy is great if you haven't checked it out. Kat does amazing reviews for him on Nerd Initiative, and Galactic is following right in that footsteps. That's going to be one that everybody's going to be talking about in November. Kurt, before we let you go though, so we have talked a little bit about Star Wars. I don't think we ever got your favorite Star Wars movie and why.
Uh, so I think my favorite one is probably Empire Strikes Back. I mean, it's sort of a cliched answer, but it's truly like outside of being Star Wars, it's like a perfect movie. It's just so the tension, the stakes, the just the drama, everything going on in it. It's endlessly rewatchable to me, and I think the best of any of them. And I do have a soft spot as well for the prequel trilogy. I think people hate on that one, but those are a lot of fun as well. Obviously, I don't know if I would say they're as well made as Empire Strikes Back. But uh, really all the Star Wars movies, I think were Jesus, 7 texts right now. Sorry, guys. Uh, all of them were great up until that Ryan Johnson one, and the one after that. Those two, I was just like, hey, I mean, even The Force Awakens, it ends on such a great
Mhm.
cliffhanger, right? Where it's like, oh, what we're finding Luke Skywalker again. He's on this island. Like, what the f happened here to set him up like this? And then the next movie, they sort of make a giant joke out of it, and then it gets clear there's no plan whatsoever. The more it went on, it was disappointing because like I did love The Force Awakens when I first saw it, and I thought it was I was so excited to have new Star Wars movies, and then it was like watching a train wreck in like slow motion, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but I just cross my fingers that we'll get back to uh having some good Star Wars movies sooner than later, right? So eventually they gotta make a good one again. And like I said, I really liked Andor. I thought that like I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did because I'm like, oh, a sort of political Star Wars show. It's the last thing I want to watch, but I sort of gave it a chance and watched a couple episodes and I just couldn't stop watching it. So like they're still doing some good stuff. It's just they need to get that movie magic back, right? Because they're kind of on a bit of a cold streak.
I think they will. I mean, I think it's like any kind of pop culture franchise. Like it goes in its ups and downs, and
Hmm.
I think I'm right there with you. I think when they switched directors for The Last Jedi, I think that threw everything off because we've had in both of the the other prequels there, and then the main four, five, six, it's been one director.
Yep.
So when you do that switch, it's a different vision. It's not going to line up no matter what and what you want to try, and that throws anything off. And then trying to come back and reset, like it's messy. But I do agree with you about Andor. Andor, I think, was the biggest surprise for me as a Star Wars fan. I thought it started super slow, though. I will say, like,
Oh, it was. I couldn't imagine watching that show weekly, right?
yeah.
Because it's very slow.
Took me so
Uh,
much of it.
Oh yeah, agreed. It took me like two rewatches to finally go, okay, like now I get it.
Hmm.
and so to be fair to Disney and Lucasfilm, because I've been a bit critical of them, they supported that show and made it when that was not a no-brainer because I mean like it's pretty expensive and risky proposition, right? We're doing this drama that's very adult facing and not at all something that kids can just tune in for in this franchise. It's basically made to sell action figures.
Mhm.
So like I respect them for taking that risk, even though they sort of lost me on the Star Wars movies, and they've also lost me, I'd say even more on the Indiana Jones stuff. Like, come on, like that's just
Let it go. I'm right there with you. I like it's just like it had its peak. It's good. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just let it go. Yeah.
It should have stayed at the Last Crusade.
Yes.
well, I'll tell you what, and I was just actually talking to Sean about this because he's a big from Distillery. He's a big just Indiana Jones guy as well. The Indiana Jones video game is actually the best Indiana Jones story since The Last Crusade. It's like perfect tonally. And I'm like, why didn't it took a video game to get it right, right? But I'm like, this the most fun I had with anything Indiana Jones since, like you said, Last Crusade. So
And I'll follow that up with the Ghostbusters video game that came out in 2000, early 2010s, I think it was. That has gone on record that that would have been the third film.
Hmm.
You can ask Dan Aykroyd. Him and Harold Ramis both wrote that together. And if you play that, which has had so many HD remakes, well deserved. It's so much better. Like, don't get me wrong, I like the Afterlife, but Frozen Empire, yeah, okay.
Yeah. But
It's the Crystal Skull of the Ghostbusters.
well, like we say, some things work out in that manner, but this is going to be something that when we see the Galactic franchise
Thank
happen,
you.
I'm putting that karma out in the world. We get some movies or, maybe a live action TV show out of this. This is all going to come back to the comics. And I think seriously, when everybody goes to the FOCs, make sure you get all three books ordered, the Lost Fantasy trade paperback, Lost Fantasy #5, and Galactic #1 on October 6th. Make sure you get all three of them done. You don't want to miss what's going on here because this is going to be sort of something truly special. Like I say, it is a one of a kind experience that you're not going to see in the sci-fi genre too often, let alone ever. And I think what Kurt and his team has done has been absolutely amazing. Kurt, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. We definitely have to recap after Galactic comes out and catch up.
let's do it. Let's do it. No, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. And I like just talking all this nerdy shit with you guys about, Star Wars, all this stuff. It's fun.
Oh, absolutely. We talk that 24/7 here at Nerd Initiative. So anytime you want to swing by, please do.
Hmm.
Appreciate it.
And we'll end it like we always do on Turn a Page. When you're at the comic shops and you have a great issue in your hand that you pre-ordered early, and that issue is Galactic by Distillery, and you see somebody struggling to find something, hand them a copy. Tell them turn a page. We'll see you next time.
I'm out.